Hey, this is Nina. The topic of our group is the Cold War, and my part is a bipolar to unipolar transition. The United States and the Soviet Union, these two superpowers stood for two opposite ideologies, which put a start to the Cold War. First, the collapse of the Soviet Union. In December of 1991, the Soviet Union disintegrated into 15 separate countries. The Soviet Union, America's great superpower rival and the Cold War nemesis, ceased to exist. The end of the Cold War and the Soviet Union's collapse left Americans grappling with the question about the new position of the United States as the world's only superpower. The Soviet Union collapsed for several reasons. First, the government limited people's freedom, which triggered revolts in the end. The Soviet Union was created intending to overcome the differences between nations instead of creating a monolithic state based on a centralized economical and political system. Well, the state eventually transformed into a totalitarian state in which the communist leadership had completely controlled everything. From the mid 1960s until 1982, Brezhnev held power, and he limited people's right to criticize. Under Brezhnev, critics faced arrest and imprisonment. Andrew Sakharev, a distinguished Soviet scientist, spoke out for civil liberties. Brezhnev government silenced him. Despite the government's actions, Sakharov and the other critics inspired people to resist communist policies. By late 1989, a powerful democracy movement was sweeping throughout the Eastern European countries. Everywhere, people took the street demanding reforms. One by one, communist governments fell. Second, the Soviet Union's economic planning failed to meet the needs of the state, which led to economic stagnation and the acceleration of the collapse of the Soviet Union. As a communist country, the Soviet Union had a command economy in which the government makes economic decisions instead of the producers and consumers. Central economic planning led to inefficiency and waste. Government planners in Moscow, however, knew little about local needs, which caused consumers' needs often were not met. Unlike the US, which experienced booms during the Cold War, the economy of the Soviet Union stagnated. Frustration with the bad economy, a series of independent movements took place in the publics of the USSR's fringes. And this graph shows the GDP of the Soviet Union from 1940s to 2000s. And we can see a very obvious decline from the start of the Cold War. Last but not least, the Soviets underestimated the degree to which the non-Russian ethnic groups in the country would resist assimilation into a Russianized state. The disintegration of the Soviet Union began on the peripheries in the non-Russian areas. In 1987, the first region to demand autonomy was the Baltic region. The nationalist movements in Baltic constituted a strong challenge to Gorbachev's policy of glasnost. At first, Gorbachev didn't want to crack down too severely on the participants in these movements, but then he realized allowing them to run their courses would encourage the other non-Russian regions to revolt. The Soviet Union would completely collapse if all of the periphery republics were to demand independence. As is expected, after the initiative from Baltic, similar movements sprung up all over the former Soviet Union. and the situation was out of control. Well, this photo shows the 15 separate countries collapsed from the Soviet Union, like Russia, Kazakh, and Ukraine. The collapse of Soviet Union was hailed by the West as a victory for freedom, a triumph of democracy over totalitarianism, and evidence of the superiority of capitalism over socialism. The most powerful rival of the United States was gone, so nothing can scare it anymore. The solution of Soviet Union, the main goal of the Bush administration was economic and political stability and security for Russia, Baltics, and the states of the former Soviet Union. In response, the United States articulated 5 basic principles that would guide U.S. policy toward the emerging republics. The basic message was very clear. If the new republic could follow these principles, they could expect cooperation and assistance from the United States. These countries accepted these principles immediately, and diplomatic relations were established. In February 1992, Baker visited the remaining republics. Yeltsin met with Bush at Camp David in February 1992, followed by a formal state visit to Washington in June. Leaders from Kazakhstan and Ukraine visited Washington in May 1992. For the United States, this smart move of helping these countries at such a proper time enhanced its prestige and the leading role of the world.